Ask yourself a question. When you think about the most important players on a football pitch, who comes to mind? The striker who scores the goals? The midfielder who controls the tempo? Maybe the goalkeeper who makes the crucial save? Nobody ever says the fullback. Nobody ever points to the number 2 or the number 3 and says, that is the player who makes everything work. And yet, here we are. Because the truth is, in the modern game, the fullback position has become one of the most tactically complex, physically demanding, and strategically decisive roles in all of football. And if you have been sleeping on it, this episode is going to wake you up. Welcome back to From 1 to 11, Episode 3. We have already broken down the goalkeeper and the center backs. Now we move wider. We move to the positions that live on the edges of the defensive line, the positions that connect defense to attack, the positions that have been completely and utterly reinvented over the last 3 decades. The number 2 and the number 3. The right back and the left back. Call them what you want, but by the end of this episode you will call them what they truly are. The engines of modern football. Let us go back. Let us go back to a time when fullbacks had one job. 1. Stop the winger. That was it. You stayed in your lane, you tracked your man, you made the tackle, and you gave the ball to someone who actually knew what to do with it. The fullback was a workhorse, a soldier, appreciated only when things went wrong and blamed every single time they did. Football in its earlier eras, the 4-4-2 dominated decades, the rigid defensive structures of the 1970s and 1980s, treated the fullback almost like a necessary inconvenience. You needed someone out there wide at the back, so you put someone there. But ask them to create? Ask them to carry the ball? Ask them to influence the game going forward? Absolutely not. Stay back. Do your job. Let the real footballers play. And then everything changed. The shift did not happen overnight. It was gradual. It was tactical. It was driven by visionaries who looked at that wide defensive position and saw something nobody else was seeing. They saw space. They saw opportunity. They saw an entire dimension of the pitch that was being completely wasted. And they began to build systems that would unlock it. The fullback was no longer just a defender. The fullback was about to become a weapon. To understand where we are today, you need to understand the foundation. The traditional fullback. This is where it all starts. The traditional fullback's entire existence was built around one principle: defensive security. Their positioning was simple. They stayed connected to the defensive line. They tracked the opposition winger. They provided cover. They were the last line of resistance before the center backs. In a classic 4-4-2, the fullbacks formed the 2 outer pillars of a flat back 4, and their primary duty was to ensure that the wide areas of the pitch behind the midfield line were never exposed. No adventure, no ambition, just discipline. But even within that traditional framework, there were players who showed the world that something more was possible. There were players who refused to be limited. And the first name you have to mention, the name that sits at the very beginning of this evolutionary story, is Cafu. The Brazilian right-back who played for Roma and AC Milan and who captained Brazil to World Cup glory in 2002 is one of the most complete fullbacks the game has ever seen. Cafu did not reinvent the position in the way we will discuss later, but he elevated it. He showed that a fullback could be an athlete in the truest sense of the word. His engine was extraordinary. His ability to get up and down that right flank over 90 minutes, sometimes over 120, was something that defied human logic. He was aggressive in the tackle, positionally intelligent, and he had the hunger to overlap and contribute in attack without ever leaving his team defensively vulnerable. Cafu understood the balance. And that balance is the foundational concept of everything we are about to break down. On the other side of that Brazil team, you had Roberto Carlos. And if Cafu was the disciplined warrior, Roberto Carlos was the chaos theory made flesh. Here was a left-back who could hit a football so hard and with such ferocity that goalkeepers across the world would simply move out of the way and let it go in. His free kick against France in 1997 is still being studied, still being watched. A ball that bent so dramatically, so impossibly, that the physics of it took scientists years to fully explain. But beyond the set pieces, beyond the thunderbolt shooting, Roberto Carlos was a left-back who genuinely influenced games in attack. He pushed high, he combined, he created, and he scored. He was not a perfect defender. There were moments where the space he left behind was an invitation that opponents were desperate to accept. But what he gave going forward was so devastating, so electric, that every team who faced Brazil had to account for him, had to respect him, had to fear him. Cafu and Roberto Carlos together. A right back and a left back who were both box office. Both dangerous. Both capable of changing games. That Brazilian side showed the world a vision of what fullbacks could be, and football would spend the next 2 decades chasing that vision and building upon it. But before football fully embraced the attacking fullback, it first had to reconcile something. Because for every Roberto Carlos bombing forward and leaving space behind, there was a tactical question that demanded an answer. What happens when you lose the ball? What happens in that split second of transition? That terrifying moment when your fullback is 40 meters up the pitch and the opposition is breaking at pace into the space he has just vacated. This question shaped one of the most important fullback profiles in the game. The defensive fullback. The defensive fullback is not a romantic figure. They do not appear in highlight reels. They do not trend on social media. But in terms of tactical function, they are absolutely essential to certain systems and certain managers. The defensive fullback's job is to provide structural security. They sit deep. They protect the space in behind. They are the goalkeeper's shield when the defensive line is high and the press is on. In a team that plays with high-intensity pressing and pushes its center-backs aggressively into midfield duels, the defensive fullback is the anchor who keeps the shape intact. Think about Ashley Cole in his absolute prime at Chelsea under Jose Mourinho. Cole was not a conventional defensive fullback in the traditional sense. He had pace, he had quality in possession, he could handle himself in 1-versus-1 situations with the best wingers in the world, but his default mentality was defensive. His positioning was conservative. His first thought was always containment. Mourinho trusted him precisely because Cole understood the discipline required to defend properly at the highest level. He would not chase the game. He would not gamble. He would hold his position, force the winger wide, stay on his feet, and make the attacker do something extraordinary to beat him. And most of the time, they could not. That defensive reliability is the cornerstone of everything. Because here is the thing about the fullback evolution, it did not happen by abandoning defensive responsibility. The great fullbacks of the modern era are not great despite their defensive quality. They are great because of it. The attacking brilliance you see from the best number 2s and number 3s in the world today is only possible because their managers trust them to defend. The attacking license is earned through defensive discipline. Always. Now we can talk about the attacking fullback. Because this is where the transformation truly accelerates. The attacking fullback is defined by their ability to function as an additional offensive player, to create numerical superiority in wide areas, to deliver crosses, to carry the ball into dangerous positions, and to contribute directly to goals. In a 4-3-3, the attacking fullback is one of the most important cogs in the offensive machine. When the 2 wide forwards push inward or make runs in behind, it is the fullback who fills the width, who provides the outlet, who stretches the defensive line and forces the opposition to make decisions they do not want to make. Marcelo at Real Madrid under Carlo Ancelotti and Zinedine Zidane was the prototype of the attacking left-back taken to its absolute extreme. There are moments watching Marcelo where you genuinely have to stop and ask, is this man playing left-back, or is he playing left-winger? The answer, depending on the phase of play, could be either. Marcelo had the technical quality of a midfielder, the creativity of a forward, and the ambition of someone who had absolutely no interest in staying passive while the game was being played around him. His combination play with Cristiano Ronaldo on the left side of Real Madrid's attack was some of the most devastating wing play in Champions League history. His diagonal runs, his 1-2s in tight spaces, his ability to arrive late into the box, it was extraordinary. And yes, he left space behind. Yes, there were tactical concerns about his defensive positioning. But in a team built around individual brilliance and attacking superiority, Marcelo's offensive contribution was so enormous that Real Madrid were willing to manage the risk. On the opposite side of the pitch, Dani Alves at Barcelona was doing something equally spectacular but with a different flavor. Alves was more dynamic than Marcelo, more electric in his movement patterns, more relentless in his pressing and his recovery runs. He was the engine on Barcelona's right flank for years. His statistics during the peak Guardiola era at the new camp are astonishing. More assists than most midfielders, more final third entries than most wingers, all while playing right back. Alves understood how to read the game at a level that allowed him to gamble going forward because he was fast enough and smart enough to recover his position before the danger could materialize. He was a footballer who played fullback, not a defender who occasionally helped in attack. A footballer. And that distinction matters enormously. Andrew Robertson at Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp is another profile worth examining here. Robertson is relentless. The word that defines him more than any other is energy. His ability to cover ground over 90 minutes is extraordinary. His crossing under pressure is excellent, and his willingness to engage in pressing duels high up the pitch is a central part of how Liverpool suffocate opponents. In Klopp's 4-3-3, Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold function almost like additional midfielders in possession. They push high, they occupy half spaces, they link with the front three, and they create numerical overloads that the opposition defensive structure simply cannot deal with. Robertson does it on the left with a combination of raw athleticism and football intelligence that makes him one of the best attacking fullbacks in the Premier League's history. But Robertson is still, at his core, an overlapping fullback. And the overlapping fullback is a specific tactical identity that is worth examining in detail, because it underpins so much of how modern attacking football is constructed. The overlapping fullback is the classic attacking archetype. The run down the outside. The underlap left to the winger while the fullback provides the width. In possession, the overlapping fullback pushes beyond the winger on the outside lane, forcing the opposition-wide defender to make a decision. Do you track the fullback and leave space inside for the winger to cut in? Or do you hold your position and allow the fullback to receive in space on the outside? It is a simple dilemma on paper. In practice, at high speed, under pressure, it is extraordinarily difficult to solve. In a 4-3-3, the overlapping fullback works in perfect symbiosis with an inverted winger. Think about Robertson and Mohamed Salah on Liverpool's right side, except now flip it to the left, and think about Robertson overlapping around the outside while the left winger cuts inside. The winger occupies the central defender with the threat of his drive into the box. The fullback receives wide, isolated against the right back of the opposition. Now you have a cross. Now you have a threat. Now the defense has to commit resources to stop it, and that creates space elsewhere. This is width creation in its most fundamental form, and it remains one of the most effective attacking patterns in modern football because the solution to it requires extraordinary defensive coordination. But here is where the game evolved again. Because football, always hungry, always searching, looked at the overlapping fullback and asked, what if we turn this concept inside out? What if instead of the fullback going around the outside, the fullback came inside? What if the fullback occupied the spaces that belong to the midfield? What if the number 2 became, in possession, an 8th? What if the number 3 became a 6? This was the birth of the inverted fullback. And the man most responsible for making this concept mainstream was Pep Guardiola. Guardiola's influence on the fullback position is so profound, so comprehensive, that it deserves its own conversation. But let us place it in context. When Guardiola arrived at Bayern Munich in 2013, he inherited Philipp Lahm. Lahm had spent his career as one of the finest traditional right-backs. Here was a player who, in defensive terms, was perfectly capable. But in possession, Cancelo was something extraordinary. His ability to receive the ball in tight spaces, to combine under pressure, to find passes that no other right-back or left-back in the world could even conceive of attempting. It made him arguably the best fullback in the world during his peak at City. Guardiola used him on both sides, left-back and right-back, inverted on both. And on either side, Cancelo functioned more like a central midfielder than a defender, arriving in the half spaces, linking with Kevin De Bruyne and Ilkay Gundogan, playing sharp combinations that carved through defensive blocks. Watching Cancelo in a Guardiola possession sequence was watching something that felt genuinely new, something that football had not quite seen before. Kyle Walker at City serves as a fascinating contrast to Cancelo. Walker, on the right side, often inverted but with a different purpose. His role was frequently more about providing cover, staying deeper to protect against the transition and to allow others to push forward. Walker's athleticism, his sheer speed, meant that even when he was positioned conservatively, he was an asset in the transition press. If the ball was lost, Walker's recovery pace was so devastating that it functioned almost like having an extra defender who could teleport. His role evolved over the years at City from attacking right back to a more controlled, structured inverted version, the defensive insurance that allowed the rest of the system to be aggressive. And then there is the underlapping fullback exchanges in football history. Messi would receive the ball, draw the defensive press, and Alba's underlapping run would arrive precisely at the moment the space opened. The give and go, the wall pass, repeated over and over with a telepathic precision that defenses simply had no answer for. We have now covered the traditional, the defensive, the attacking, the overlapping, the inverted, and the underlapping fullback. But the modern game demands more. Because in elite football today, there is one profile that sits above all the others in terms of tactical complexity and physical demand. The complete modern fullback. The player who can do everything. Who can defend like a specialist, attack like a winger, invert like a midfielder, press like a forward, and read the game like a coach. These players are rare, exceptional, and they are worth every penny clubs spend to acquire them. Trent Alexander-Arnold is the most fascinating case study in modern football. His tracking of runners is not his strength, the right-back position. His passing range is not right-back quality. It is not even midfielder quality. It is playmaker quality. His ability to pick out runners in behind with outside-of-the-foot deliveries from deep positions, to switch play with laser precision across 60 meters of pitch, to find the pocket forward in a crowded penalty area. It is the passing ability of one of the best number 8s in world football, deployed from a defensive position. Under Jurgen Klopp, Alexander-Arnold's role evolved progressively until he was essentially functioning as a right-sided midfielder in Liverpool's possession phases, dropping into central positions and orchestrating the build-up while the right winger provided the width he was vacating. Liverpool were, in certain moments, playing with 4 midfielders in possession, and one of them wore the number 66 shirt and was supposed to be a right-back. His work with Liverpool, the Champions League nights, the Premier League title, the delivery that dissected Barcelona in that iconic semi-final comeback at Anfield, these are moments that define an era. And they all came from a right-back. A fullback who was asked to do what fullbacks were never supposed to do, and who did it better than almost anyone in the world. Reece James at Chelsea represents yet another dimension of the complete modern fullback. James brings the physical and technical attributes that give you everything you want from the position. His crossing is among the best in England, his athleticism is exceptional, his defensive aggression is genuine, and his ability to combine in tight spaces gives Chelsea's wide build-up real dynamism. Under Thomas Tuchel in the back 3 system, James operated as a right wing-back, which brings us to another profile we must address. The wing-back. In a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, the full-back does not exist in the traditional sense. Instead, you have wing-backs, players who occupy the entire flank from penalty area to penalty area. The wing-back must have the defensive qualities of a full-back and the attacking qualities of a winger. In possession, they provide the entire width of the team. Out of possession, they track back to form a back 5. The physical demands of the role are among the highest in football. Stamina, speed, technical quality under pressure, the wing-back must have all of it. Achraf Hakimi at Inter Milan under Antonio Conte was the wing-back at its most devastating. In Conte's 3-5-2, Hakimi had license to bomb forward relentlessly. His pace was terrifying, one of the fastest players in world football, and Conte built his system to funnel possession toward him in wide areas so that Hakimi could exploit the space behind opposing fullbacks. The result was one of the most impactful wing-back seasons in Serie A history. Goals, assists, key contributions, Hakimi's performances that season were a masterclass in how the wing-back role, given the right player and the right system, becomes one of the most dangerous weapons in football. Theo Hernandez at AC Milan brings similar energy to the left side. His pace, his directness, his ability to beat a man and deliver, Hernandez is the kind of left-back or left-wing-back who makes entire opposition defensive structures recalibrate. When Milan play in a back 4, Hernandez is an attacking left-back of the highest order. When they shift shape, he transitions into the wing-back role seamlessly. His physicality and ambition make him one of the most electric wide defenders in European football. Now let us talk about how all of these profiles function differently across formations, because formation shapes everything. In a 4-2-3-1, the fullback's role is influenced heavily by the double pivot in midfield. With two defensive midfielders providing cover, the fullbacks are given more freedom to push forward because the pivot can drop and cover the space in behind. This is why you often see more attacking fullback behavior in teams that use a double pivot. The safety net is built into the structure. The fullback can overlap without fear because there is always a midfielder there to recover the central space. In a 4-4-2, the fullback's relationship with the wide midfielder on their side is critical. The fullback and the wide midfielder operate as a unit, almost like a vertical partnership on the flank. When the wide midfielder pushes forward, the fullback must hold deeper to maintain defensive shape. When the wide midfielder drops to receive, the fullback can push to provide the forward option. It is a constant conversation, constant adjustment, and the best fullbacks in this system are the ones who can read their partner's positioning instinctively, without needing to look. In a 3-4-3 or 3-5-2, as we discussed, the fullback becomes the wingback and the role expands dramatically in every direction. The tactical responsibility is enormous. You are simultaneously the widest attacking player and the widest defensive player. The decision-making required, when to go, when to hold, when to press high and when to drop, is extraordinarily complex and demands a player with tactical maturity beyond most positions. The pressing role of fullbacks is also worth examining in detail because in high-press systems, the fullbacks are not passive participants. In Klopp's Liverpool, in Guardiola's City, in Conte's Inter, the fullbacks are active agents in the press. They are the players who trigger the press on short goal kicks. They are the players who cut off the opposition's wide passing lanes when the press is on. They are the players who must be first to pressure the opposition's wide defenders when the ball goes into wide areas. The fullback who cannot press is a liability in modern football, because the press only works when everyone does their job. And if the fullback is passive, the structure breaks. The block has a hole in it, and the opposition will find it. The physical demands that come with all of this, the pressing, the overlapping, the underlapping, the inverting, the tracking, the recovering, make the modern fullback one of the most physically loaded positions on the pitch. GPS data from elite clubs regularly shows that fullbacks cover more total distance than almost any other position. High-speed sprint distances for wide defenders in pressing systems are extraordinary. The position requires the fitness of a winger, the recovery speed of a center-back, and the endurance of a central midfielder. All at once. All for 90 minutes. And this is why, when you truly understand the modern fullback, you cannot look at the number 2 and the number 3 the same way again. These are not supporting actors. These are not utility positions. These are the players who determine the width of your attack. The players who create the overloads that unlock defenses. The players who press triggers that make your defensive system function. The players who, in the right system, can be the most creative players on the pitch. The evolution from Cafu and Roberto Carlos, already exceptional, through Dani Alves and Ashley Cole, through the Guardiola revolution with Lam and Cancelo, to the Alexander-Arnold era of the fullback as a primary creator, this is one of the greatest positional evolutions in the history of football. And it is still happening. Right now, the position is still evolving, still being reimagined, still finding new expressions in new systems under new coaches who refuse to accept conventional limits. So the next time you watch a football match and the commentator praises the striker's movement or the midfielder's vision, take a moment. Look wider. Watch the fullbacks. Watch how they move. Watch where they position. Watch how the entire shape of the team changes when they step forward. Watch how space opens up because of the decisions they make. Watch how the opposition scrambles to deal with a run they saw but could not stop. Watch the number 2 and the number 3 and understand, really understand, that these positions are not the footnotes of football. They are chapters that shape every single story the game tells. We will be back soon for episode 4. And we are going up the spine. We are going into the engine room. The number 4, the number 5, and the number 6. The defensive midfield positions. The players who break up play, who start moves, who protect, who dictate. The unsung architects of modern football. Do not go anywhere.